All right. Well, let's see if we can do this real quick. As I say to people all the time, you live inside the new heaven and new earth that was prophesied in Revelation 21 and 22, as well as Isaiah 65 and 66. You live in it right now. We've been living in it for 2,000 years. The entirety of biblical prophecy has been fulfilled. You are not awaiting the fulfillment of anything. What's going on right now is hysteria, primarily. Religious tradition is the biggest thing. It's not a question about intelligence of individuals or anything like that, which I suspect many people may think I am thinking. I am not. I used to believe all the very same things. What you're witnessing today is just a misunderstanding. It's a number of very strange misunderstandings, but they're mostly religious traditions. And in line with these very strange religious traditions, we have another one, which is a day is like 1,000 years. This is the linchpin for numerous failed prophetic formulas and all sorts of predictions. The problem is that the Bible never says that a day is 1,000 years. This is a misunderstanding of Psalm chapter 90, verse 4, which says that a day is like 1,000 years. Peter quotes from this psalm in 2 Peter. When Peter quotes from the psalm, he means the opposite of the way that we take it today, or the opposite of what the future fulfillment advocate is putting forward. The future fulfillment advocate is saying that God is being long suffering to us and that he does not experience time like us, and thus a day is 1,000 years. So they're able to explain the last 2,000 years in which nothing has happened. Going back to the 7 days of creation, they're essentially saying that the planet is on a 7,000 year cycle, one day equaling 1,000 years. We are about to approach the sixth day, and at the sixth day, Jesus will return, and of course, will establish the 1,000 year reign, which will take us through the 6,000th year into the year 7,000, where we will go to a new planet. If you're able to follow that, you have just followed standard Christian prophecy doctrine. In order to believe this, you also have to believe that the earth is currently about 6,000 years old. I do not believe this. I've never believed this, quite frankly. I've seen a lot of information to say that it is. I highly doubt that is the case. I've seen a lot of information that says the earth is flat. I also don't think the earth is flat. So yeah, put those as two strong beliefs that I have. I don't believe the earth is flat, and I don't believe the earth is 6,000 years old. This is, again, should I call it this? A hopeless attempt by the future fulfillment advocate to justify the 2,000 year gap that we are currently living in. The reality is there is no gap. The day of the Lord is happening to the initial receiver. And if you read Peter's letter, 2 Peter, according to context, you'll see that when he uses Psalm chapter 90, verse 4, referring to a day as 1,000 years, he is merely saying that God experiences time different. But he is not saying that God is being slack regarding the day of the Lord. He is saying God is not being slack regarding the day of the Lord, meaning that the day is quickly approaching the initial receiver. In order for the day to be 1,000 year doctrine to be correct, by default, God must be slack regarding the day of the Lord, which of course allows the day of the Lord to be in our future. And really, I think what part of this is that it kind of messes with a lot of your theological thinking. It's very reasonable as a modern believer to be like, well, the day of the Lord and the judgment is in our future. So we are awaiting God to come and do the judgment. Unfortunately, the day of the Lord has happened in the past. The judgment came already on the individuals. God so thoroughly dealt with the problem of the New Testament, it does not exist today, 2,000 years later. How we miss the significance of this is beyond me. I didn't notice it for years. But the aggressor of the New Testament doesn't exist today. He was destroyed 2,000 years ago in the destruction of Jerusalem, and most notably the destruction of the temple in 70 AD. People say, where's the judgment on the unbelievers? Like, you're misjudging the context. The people who don't believe in the Messiah are the individuals that are killing the disciples. They're killing the saints. They clearly don't believe. Don't you remember Jesus said people are going to kill you and think they're doing God's work? Those people existed in the first century. You live under no threat of that happening to you. I realize there's places in the world where being a Christian is a death sentence. But you got to understand, in the New Testament storyline, everyone who believes in the Messiah is being persecuted. They're being violently persecuted by the Jewish authority structure, which was destroyed in 70 AD. It's the only aggressor of the New Testament. There's a very clear bad guy of the New Testament. The people that Jesus was always getting into it with are the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the Jewish authority structure of the day, which is based power. Their base of power is in the temple in Jerusalem. That's the only people Jesus is getting into it with. The fulfillment of biblical prophecy, especially in the New Testament, is detailing to you the vengeance that God is going to bring against the people that killed his son. It's a misunderstanding. It's a glorious misunderstanding. But look, a day is not 1,000 years. It's not 1,000 years anywhere in the Bible. Think about this. No person in the Bible knows this understanding. Moses, Jeremiah, Isaiah, Jesus, Peter, Paul, James, John. No one has heard of this. No one. Does that not sound like something that was invented later on by another person? Definitely. A day's not 1,000 years. If a person uses this as the basis for their doctrine of anything, it's doomed for failure, because a day is not 1,000 years. If you don't believe me, go read the passage, Psalm chapter 90, verse 4, and you'll see that he is not saying that a day is 1,000 years. He's saying a day is like 1,000 years, meaning it has no reference to a literal 1,000 at all. It's not literally 1,000 years. Go look up the word day. It's used like 7,000 times in the Bible. It never means 1,000. Go look at how the psalm was quoted by Peter. You'll see he means it in opposite fashion of how we mean it as future fulfillment advocates today. So, I don't know how else to kind of really go with this. I do have an article. I've written it, but it's being like edited or whatever on the site. The site changed. It's called The Last Days Revealed. I'll get a link and everything put down there. It's still getting it's changed a good amount since the previous week. Changed locations even in about a week. So I have an article that also goes into detail about this, just like I did previously. And I think I'll keep doing it like that. But yeah, a day is not 1,000 years. When a person says that, it'd be great if we could just stop them right then and say, can you prove that? But no one does this because everyone believes it to be true. It's the standard religious belief of all the people is that a day is 1,000 years. They can use that phrase and no one will question it. Go and read that psalm for yourself and you'll see that it does not mean 1,000 years. And then ponder to yourself the level of craziness that has been built on top of this doctrine. That's just kind of how it goes. But yeah, Bible prophecy is fulfilled. The entirety of biblical prophecy is fulfilled. Read it according to context. If there's 3 problems in the Bible, it is people don't know idioms, figures of speech. Individuals are not familiar with the fact that the words world, earth, and forever do not usually mean what they directly state. And then contextual reading. If you read 2 Peter according to context, you'll see that the judgment is falling on the initial receiver. The day of the Lord is happening to the initial receiver. God is not being slack regarding his promise. He is bringing the promise to them, the first century believers. They're the ones. Closing thought here. It is quite peculiar to consider the belief structure that the Future Fulfillment Advocate has regarding types. Isn't it amazing? Back in the first century, you had Jesus, you had John the Baptist, and you had the disciples. Without question, the most spiritually astute individuals that have ever lived. The Future Fulfillment Advocate believes that they're going through the type. And that we, the people that are living in the modern day, 2017, some of the most spiritually depleted individuals, nowhere near any of the previously mentioned folks, that we're the ones that are going through the actual event. Jesus, John the Baptist, the disciples, they're going through the type. We're reading about them so that we know how to go through the actual event. And I say it's kind of comical. It's actually very funny for me personally, because obviously, if you're going to have a showdown, you want to use the best people possible. The best people existed 2,000 years ago. The events happening to them, you're reading a record. That's it.